Hey, David Duford here at the Ford Insurance Group, where I train and recruit agents nationally to sell final expense Medicare annuities and ACA. Thank you for being here. I'm here with Mr. Joseph today. We're doing a one-on-one consultation where Joseph asks me anything about selling insurance, and my job is to help him as much as possible. Joseph, jump right in and introduce yourself and tell us, jump in and ask your questions and let me help you.
So my name is Joseph. I just graduated. Well, I'm gonna graduate this Saturday,
Good.
and I'm looking to get into the insurance sales career.
Great.
And I have a lot of questions.
Excellent. You
So,
start right away wherever you want to.
okay. So I did read your book for new agents. What is your number one best advice? Because there's like, I think you had like listed 7.
Yeah. Okay. So let's see do I remember what I actually wrote? I mean, for me, it's hard to say just one. If I had to bring it down to just one, it would be do your due diligence and take your time before you make a decision. I think that's probably the biggest precursor to failure, is jumping in before people really understand what it is they're even doing. I talked to a guy earlier today. He's successful in other businesses, just like normal. Somebody called him. He was really impressed, didn't ask questions. And as he got into the business, he realized the promises delivered weren't kept. Poor leads, poor training, poor support, and a huge missed opportunity to do well. So the best thing you can do is do your due diligence, do your research on products, agencies that best serve those niches that you're interested in, ask for referrals of successful agents at those agencies, and really look at this like you're going to get married to an agency. If you don't want to get married, a lot, it's pretty expensive and time consuming. So slow down and figure things out for yourself. And when you commit, completely commit.
Completely commit. Okay. So how much training outside of what the company gives you should you take? Like
What
like 2 hours, like a day, or does it depend, I guess?
are you asking me? How much training should you do a day?
Yeah.
Or okay. Yeah, it's a good question. I covered this last night on a video I did live on YouTube about how to survive your first year selling final expense. And I kind of gave it from the perspective of, okay, I'm here. I was where you were on day one, starting off. I remember my first day in the field. I'm now 10 and a half years later. I've got this perspective looking backwards that's unique, right? Compared to what you have, because I've been through everything you're about to go through. I've been through things you don't even know you're going to be going through. And I'm on the other end of this saying it was all absolutely worth it. Boy, I'm glad I didn't quit fully the first time I quit. I'm glad I came back. I'm glad I did what I was supposed to do, because the fruit of my labor has been outstanding relative to my peers, relative to the people I went to high school with. My lifestyle is fantastic. I say all this because if that was going to be your case, imagine for a moment that you would be in that position of whatever your income goals are in life, whatever your wealth goals were like. What wouldn't you do to accomplish those goals? In other words, would you do just an hour of training?
Mm-hmm.
Would you do 2 hours, 3 hours? Would you do what it took, in other words, to be successful? I think that is a good perspective to have. It's not exactly like you got to do exactly this amount of hours.
Yeah.
And so, but it's a perspective that should inform everything that you're doing to prepare, because you're about to partake in a business where the most successful in this business make an incredible sum of money, and not just about the money, but the lifestyle too. And so I would say do everything. You should be living and breathing this business and being all in on the studying of it, the rehearsal, the practice, to give yourself the best odds of success, because it is absolutely worth it.
Okay. That's, I think, why I was so attracted to the business, was you get what you put in pretty much, and that's what I really
Now, just to
like
be
about it.
honest,
Yes.
here's how it looks. You get what you put in, but you get beat up for a long ass time. So don't be surprised getting in that it's not all rainbows and sunshine like the guys like myself on YouTube say it is. I try to preempt all this. I'm like, hey, let me give you the real deal here. But what I have found more often than not is that agents will struggle on some level for a year, 2 years even, until they find their footing and really start to progress upwards in success. And the last thing I'll mention is this: is that success in life, and this is true not just in insurance, but life and other businesses, it's the hockey stick analogy. You're familiar with that, Joseph?
Hockey stick around? No.
So think about a hockey stick on its side, right? It's like
Yeah.
real straight. It kind of curves a little
Then
bit, then boom, it curves up. That's really been my business experience. I've made more money. I've had more success in the past 3 years than in the 7 years prior to that. And I was doing pretty well after my second year in the business. I was progressively building something and I was making good money relative to what I was, but it really took off in the years 8, 9, and 10. And so my point is that it was for where I'm at now to where it was in the beginning, it was absolutely worth that struggle, because that's kind of what, in a sense, filters or culls the herd. It thins the herd. It is survival of the fittest. The strong survive. And that's a good thing. So my point is, more reason not to give up and to keep going despite the odds and difficulty, because pretty much everybody who's made it has had to deal with that too.
Less than 10%.
Yeah, for sure.
That's crazy. So the other question is, how do you find a mentor? Like, that's another thing, because I don't have a very big network of people that I know.
Well, I mean, the definition of mentor has changed since I got into the business. I mean, I never had a mentor personally. I wasn't in anybody's ear talking to them daily. There's kind of like a cottage industry based around monetizing the idea of a mentor. I think for most of us, generally speaking, we have people we look up to in the business that we model our actions around. Examples of success, of people who've been where you are and who have climbed the ladder of success. Their mentorship may be just in their writings. It may be in just, their videos nowadays, right? But I think that's okay to have. There's very few people that, progress to the point where they've got like a rich uncle, or, they've got somebody in their cadre that's, close to them, that they have this like ongoing, consistent mentorship type of effort to. So, I think the key thing for you is in this specific line of work is you need to work with an agency that reflects what you ultimately want to have. And if you don't know what that is, you need to think about that. Like, where do you want to be in 5 years, 10 years from now? Do you want to run a big agency? Do you want to just be a producer and have passive income? And you need to figure out what that is and what that looks like as best as you can. And then seek out working for or partnering with an agency that reflects what it is that you want. And there you're going to find somebody, usually in many of those contexts, the people at the top want to help the guys at the bottom that show aspiration and they want to work and they show, a desire. Because, what you'll find in many of the top, it's lonely. And we're always inspired by those people who want something of themselves, because many of us were in that spot when we first started. So that's where I would look for a mentor. And they should just kind of show up. People that you see. And yeah. And remember, mentorship takes time if you get the luxury of having somebody to actually one-on-one coach you. So make sure you bring them value first. Yeah. Just because you're like, hey, can you be my mentor? It's like, well, anybody who's successful doesn't have time, period. That's just how their life is. So you need to give first to receive. That's why I'd say join an agency, make somebody money and show value. And they'll say, okay, this person's serious. They're actually applying what we teach. And anybody in an agency function wants more out of that person who takes action and has success.
Okay. So, you mentioned in your book, Ben Feldman.
Yeah.
What's the best advice that you got from that book? What's the best advice? You said like track to run on, right?
That would probably be it. I mean, Ben's a funny guy. He's like short. He had a lisp. If you listen to his old videos, he's very diminutive. He's just not somebody you thought would be an incredible salesperson. And I think that's in itself probably what I got the most out of it, is like when you think salesperson, you think like Alec Baldwin and Glenn Ross, like these like type A alpha types that are in suits and drive BMWs and they're hot shots, Jordan Belfort types. But that's just a Hollywood representation. Yeah. Because they're just the most extreme, outlandish types that just sell tickets in movie theaters. But truthfully, what matters are people who don't have all the stuff like that, or even the charisma. It's people who care, who have discipline, that follow a system and relentlessly execute despite the odds. And I think that's interesting with Ben, because, he started off selling 5-cent a week policies to farmhands and low income people before he raised to the echelon of, selling, VIP business owners like huge policies. So it's cool in the sense that, one thing that you do get from reading Ben's stuff is, he came from nothing. He got rejected. People turned him away. They didn't think he'd be any good at life insurance sales, but that kind of spirit of nonstop relentlessness is what you need. And it's good to see that. So I think just his life and the process of it is probably the biggest thing to take away. And the cool thing too, Joseph, I'll say to this, another piece of advice I'd give you. I got this from Tony Robbins. I never was a Tony Robbins fan, but this is one thing I picked up from him, is that he recommends that you read autobiographies from successful people. Okay. One of the things you want to train yourself on is, because understand, getting into life where you want extraordinary outcomes, like extraordinary wealth, income, experiences, require you to do things that are extraordinary, like change the way that you're thinking, right? Look at the world a little differently. And one of the best things you can do is program yourself and your perception on life and read about people who came from nothing and had massive success. So like, for example, good books that I would recommend, the autobiography of Ben Franklin's a really good book. Okay. Because you can see him and his, he ran away from home, landed in Philly, for America's first millionaire. And you can see his whole rise to success in business before he even, got to the founding of our country. And then you can read about other books. Coach is good. That's A.L. Williams. He sold his business to Primerica, basically. And he's kind of as you read about him more, he's kind of as like a touchstone. People either love him or hate him. But, he was just some guy in South Georgia, had lost his dad, I think, and had whole life insurance. He hated whole life, and Primerica is all about term insurance. But he recruited hundreds of thousands of people and like totally changed the industry. So kind of reading like a barn burner like that is good. There's another one called Growing Rich by Randall Baskin. That's another one that's really good.
Yeah, you put that in your book too.
Yeah. And that's a hard one to find, but it's well worth, if you can find it, reading. And just any autobiography in music, industry, business, government that's had massive success, what you'll find is here's a whole reason you read these, is there's a stream of a similarity between everybody you read from all walks of life and backgrounds, that their struggle in life very commonly early on, they're set against odds that they likely will fail or quit against, but they prevail anyway. And from that process, they learn and grow and improve and rise to the highest ranks of whatever it is that they're doing. And I think seeing that multiple times in a process to engender your mind to think about how success works helps prepare you for the reality, because you're probably no different than these people, probably more similar than you think, and likely the same things they had to go through, which many people aren't aware of, the difficulties they went through. It's kind of makes dealing with frustration in the business a little more amenable. Like, okay, if they had to deal with it, why shouldn't I? Right? Makes it like, okay, it's like, this is what everybody's got to go through. It feels a little better.
Yeah, there's like comfort in knowing that people have to go through hard things, and that means that you could do it too.
Well, and that's kind of the problem with the projection of success, is what you see on YouTube and what you see on Instagram and social media is the outcome of eating shit for years.
Yeah.
You don't see like so-and-so struggling and getting crushed and, going through divorce or personal bankruptcy or all the problems that sometimes people go through. You see the money and the power and the prestige, and it makes it look like, well, that's how it's always been, when it usually has never always been that way. It's probably just got that way.
Yeah.
There's a whole story there that isn't unearthed. And that's just, it's always lacking from the commentary, unfortunately, because it's good to hear that stuff.
It's like just watching the highlights, but not knowing the story. And that's a problem.
Yeah, it's typical media stuff. You only get the surface appeal that gets your attention, but the story behind it, which, fewer people are interested in that. is the thing that we all need to hear. It's like, how did they get to that point? Well, that's the interesting thing. And there's lessons to be learned in that.
And then I was going to ask, okay, you wrote something about emulating. So, like successful people.
Yes.
How far does that go? Like dressing up and like, you know, or like the way of thinking, or both?
I mean, for me, emulation is more about behavior from an taking action standpoint. There's a lot of mentors that say, you know, you got to dress nice and wear a 3-piece suit and all that stuff. I've always been a bum. You know, like if my wife didn't yell at me, I'd be wearing a t-shirt and gym shorts right now, you know? Yeah. So, you know, like
my wife says the same thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, but what I tried to emulate were the behavior patterns of people who are successful in life. And the behavior patterns in sales that show success is seeing the people. You know, if we look at insurance sales, if I were to say you need to emulate behaviors, then what I would want you to do is find people in the niche or product that you're going to be selling, figure out how they became successful, and try to read between the lines of their behaviors. Like, what time are they getting up every day? Yeah. What are they doing on goal setting? How are they executing their business plan and their goals on a daily basis? What do they do when the time gets tough? How do they talk? What do they talk about? Right. And there's a lot of things you can explore and think about there. But again, what you'll find is more often than not, emulating those behaviors, again, finding those strands of relevancy where they're all similar between the top producers is what you're trying to emulate.
So like one of the things, I used to be a preschool teacher at a Montessori school. So
oh, yeah. Okay, cool.
One of the things that we try to teach them and like set in their brain is consistency. And I think that's one of the things that I could bring like in this job is like being consistent. And what I learned, like I've been reading a lot of different things, and it's like one of the things is consistency. Like they have a schedule and they stick to it, and no matter how hard it gets, you still stick to the system or the plan of the day. And yeah, how does what's your schedule like?
So, you know, what I'm doing is different now. I mean, I'll talk in context to agency building, and I'll talk in context to running a business, running the final expense sales side, because I used to be a full-time agent. I mean, my schedule is basically now, you know, get up at 5:45, 6 in the morning, train physically a couple of times in the week in the gym, weightlifting. I've got goals there. The other days of the week, I'm knocking out micro tasks associated with agency building. Maybe it's like reviewing thumbnails or edits of YouTube videos, right? Because that's kind of how I develop most of my traffic. So I nail all that out of the way. And then a part of the week, the mid-morning, are set aside for either consultations with the agents like this to join my agency, or in-depth training where I take agents through the process of learning the process of selling final expense. Repeat in the afternoon, pretty much the same thing. And then intermix there, we'll do some oddball stuff like this, you know, some coaching calls where we develop content, create relationships. I'll record videos. I'll do live streams, you know, I'll really just kind of feeding the funnel, if you will.
Yeah.
It's kind of what my business has turned into. And the thing is, I've always done, from an agency building side, I've always done the same thing I'm doing now since I started really in 2014, 15. I'm just doing more of it. And it's that consistency, back to your point, which it's simple, but it's profound. It's like a consistent output of that kind of goal of, I'm going to put content out there. I'm going to influence the market. I'm going to develop a brand. Never happens overnight. It takes years if you're lucky. But the successful application of that is essentially still what I'm doing to this day. Because in my business now, on the agency building side, what matters is getting the message out there, attracting attention, and through the process of providing value, differentiate what the Ford Insurance Group does, and then capture the interest of those prospects, those agents, right, who kind of have an affinity towards what we stand for, what I stand for, what the business stands for, and then training them and following through. But what I did as an agent is pretty simple. the most important activity for you as an agent is to see the people. It's to get into presentations. It's to sit down with somebody who's interested. Okay. And then to persuade them to buy. So your 80 to 90% of your work should be sitting down and doing activities related to getting presentations or running presentations. So that means you should be running presentations as much as possible. And if you're not running presentations, door knocking to get in the door if you're face-to-face, or using the phone to set appointments, or if you're doing telesales, just being on the phone dialing. That's what you should be doing from sunrise to sunset. It's not that complicated. Again, it's easy to say, well, that's easy, but the execution of this over time, that consistency is that is the X factor. It's not you being the best in the world. It's you being good enough and executing on that strategy religiously, zealously, and consistently. And most people can't do that because that's a lot harder than it sounds. And then, I mean, your job is just to really turn into a machine. Start it. I used to I'd get up at 5, go to the gym, leave at 7:30, drive an hour and a half to get somewhere in another time zone at 8 o'clock, like down in Alabama. I'd run appointments every 45 minutes. This is at my peak in the business. I try to run 12 to 15 appointments a day, 3 to 4 days a week, usually 4 days. And I'd be done at 8 or 9, drive home an hour and a half, get home at 10 or 11, do it again the next day. So, I mean, it's simple, but it's a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
It's a machine process, right? Because I had outsourced my appointment setting. I was just running appointments or door knocking in between. And I was good at that. And I was trying to just leverage what brought me in the most money. Yeah. And that's what you ultimately want to work towards, to potentially outsourcing some elements of your business. But as a new agent, the key thing is you can start as early as 8 in the morning, running appointments, talking to people on the phone. You can go as late as you want to, 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And it's just doing those activities related to running presentations. That's critical.
Oh my God. Also, what I notice is like everyone who's successful, they have like a routine in the morning where they do physical workout. I know you were a personal trainer, right?
Like, I was. I don't know. I think it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. People who are type A mentality do type A mentality things. Okay. Like if you're like just a hard worker, it's usually not just in work. It's also in other things. Like you're very competitive. You probably are attracted to sports. Yeah. Not everybody's like that. I mean, like I was never kind of like a jock. I mean, I'm always been like an introvert, play video games type. I mean, for many years, I didn't physically exercise, even though I was a personal trainer prior to that. I just got out of the swing of it. But yeah, I think it's good and to emulate, another one of those things, emulate patterns of success in other ways besides work, right? If you have goals and believe in them for your work and your financial goals, it probably is going to bleed into personal and other ways of your life, which is good, right? Because you can set goals, you can envision betterness of some sort, and you need to execute on those other goals, because it's not just about business. It's just one part of your life. You should have goals elsewhere. So I think you're probably right. A lot of people kind of have that kind of connection with other things and on setting goals and having patterns of success that they do elsewise.
I bring it up because the first couple videos that I watch of you and versus now, you're bulking.
Yes, very dirty bulk.
You're bulking.
Just so you know, I went from 205 right as coronavirus started to 265 as like 2 weeks ago. That's I did that in like 6 months. So like I intentionally, I promise. Sincerely trying to get strong. But now I'm starting to cut back. Because I'm too fat now. So I'll be back to 205, 215 by the end of the year, I think.
I bulked too. My wife was all like, "You need to cut," because we go to the gym at 5. So it's one of those things. So
any last questions you want to ask before we wrap this up?
Let's see. What is one book I should read? What's one book I should read?
Randall Baskin's. That's my favorite.
Baskin.
Growing
Randall
Rich.
Baskin.
Again, if you can't find that one, I would read Coach by A.L. Williams.
Growing Rich. Okay.
I think that's a good combination of, from rags to riches to really tough circumstances and struggle to success, and they're all specific to the insurance business. So I think there's tons of value out of those two.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I had no idea that I'd even like set an appointment up with you. The first time that I what's it called? I got to know you was through daviddufour.com, where you like evaluate different companies and like how their structures.
Right.
Yep. And I was comparing which companies I wanted to work for and things like that. So
cool.
That was my first
thanks for telling me. Yeah, appreciate it. Well, Joseph, thank you for your time, man. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.
Have a good one.
You too.